Hello, LilyPod listeners, and welcome to another edition of LilyPod. Today we have a special guest, probably one of the most dynamic people we know, and that is Stephanie Parrish. And to introduce her, Stephanie was born and raised in Southern Idaho. She has a gift for entertaining people, having been on stage as an actor, singer, dancer since the age of 3, basically. She owned a dance studio for 30 years. She also enjoys teaching children as young as 2 years old to develop their talents. She has appeared in more than 20 Disney movies while appearing on radio and TV commercials, as well as doing voiceover work. Stephanie represented the Idaho Lions Club as an international exchange student to Australia and New Zealand. The following year, she was crowned Miss Pocatello as part of the Miss America program. She is the mother of 6 children and 11 grandchildren. Stephanie is also an internationally certified hyperbaric oxygen therapist, a nationally certified PBMT light therapist, and an internationally certified microcirculation therapist with Avison Medical. I hope I said that right.
Yes, you did.
Stephanie loves people, loves getting them the tools necessary to enjoy better health and a higher quality of life. For 9 years, Stephanie established and operated a health and wellness clinic specializing in the above-mentioned therapies and utilizing a local radio show for 2.5 years to bring the message of hope and healing to her listeners. As founder of the Vitality Health Show, airing internationally, on the Voice America Network, Stephanie has expanded awareness of alternative health options and brought the message of hope, healing, and miracles to the world. Her knowledge, compassion, and engaging style, together with consistently outstanding and often world-renowned guests, has attracted an ever-increasing number of listeners in the United States and around the world. Stephanie's passion is to find hope and miracles in even the most difficult circumstances, and the show is an inspiration to many. And I would only add to that, we appeared on her show as guests, and so she's here today returning the favor. And, welcome.
It was a great show.
Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to do this. We've been hit and missing on times back and forth, so I'm so grateful we could do this today.
Yeah, we're
Thank
finally
you.
here.
We're excited about it.
Yay.
So Stephanie, I would like you to begin by just sort of giving us an overview of your history of love and marriage. Now, you don't need to go into detail. We'll dig into that more later, but just kind of the overview of where you've been in that regard.
Okay, how long is the show? No, it's just kidding. Anyway, it's been a journey, as we all know, that that's just how things work. And I, of course, like everybody else, was a young wife at 19 years old after I had thought I was just, took on the world with everything else, was ready to get married and settle down. And I did for a while. We were confronted with a lot of fertility problems, financial problems, all sorts of things that a lot of young couples are confronted with. And just being so frustrated in not being able to have children and trying to start a new business. Well, we had multiple businesses, but I was married to my first husband for 30 years. And we adopted 3 incredible children. And then we also had 3 natural children. It took us 9 years to get started, but then we had all 6 of them within 7 years. So you add to that, the pressure of the adoption process is just so strenuous anyway, and going through fertility problems. So it put a lot of strain on our marriage, but it put a lot of strain on a lot of things. But anyway, finally, at the end of 30 years, he had a lot of mental health issues that were really, really difficult to deal with for me. And I finally had to just make the decision. It was either him or me. I mean, he was really not wanting to be alive, and tried to make sure he wasn't on numerous occasions. And it just got to the point for me, through a lot of really a lot of prayers and spiritual blessings, as difficult as it was to finally leave that marriage, because that was something we were told not to do. You know, you stick with it, you hang in there, you do these things. And it really came down to either I'm going to die or he's going to die. One of the two of us is not going to make it through this. And he's trying so hard and he's not being successful. So it's probably going to be me. It just, it was
he was
just
abusive, or because just the behavior would end up.
you know, I never thought of it as abuse, but anybody that's living in a situation where somebody is very suicidal and very, very disconnected. Yes. You know, and he's a wonderful man, and I tried really hard not to say negative things, but it was very, very difficult. And it wasn't until I was divorced for about 3 or 4 years, and I had gotten remarried. That's a whole nother story, which I'll tell you in a moment. But I'd gotten remarried, and my children were supposed to come to Canada with me because I had married a man from Canada. And then their dad decided at the last minute he would not sign the papers for them to cross the border.
Uh-oh.
So I had to leave them. And that turned out to be, I abandoned them, and it just changed the whole look of everything and feel of everything, which was not true. Obviously, I tried so hard. My kids were already enrolled in school. It's just my younger two at the time, but they were already enrolled in soccer. My son was a soccer star, and he was already enrolled up there. And my other son was in ROTC, and he was already enrolled up there. And they were so excited about this change, and then it couldn't happen. But my youngest son came up. He was about 16 at the time, about 15 at the time. And he came up to Canada and spent the summer with me. And it was really interesting because he said to me at one time, he says, "Mom, I'm so glad that you divorced Dad." And I was shocked because there was a lot of anger and bitterness with my kids through that divorce, a lot that's still lingering. And it just kind of shocked me that he said that. And I said, "Why would you say that, honey? That, you know, I thought everybody was so angry at me for doing that." And he looked at me and he said, "Mom, you were a good mom. You were always there with us. You were always at the ball games. You were always coaching us or teaching us or whatever. You were always there. But you were always, your mind and the attention was always on whether you were going to go home and find Dad dead." And he goes, "You just were not present for us," which totally shocked me. Totally shocked me.
He did die after your divorce at some point, didn't he?
He did. He just died a year ago in June. So this June will be 2 years. Not from an actual suicide, but from effects from the suicide attempts that he had. So there's a lot to all that too. But you know, and we remained friends for a long, long time up until the last 9 months before he passed away. But we were very good friends, and he called me sometimes 2 and 3 times a week, which was hard on my new husband because that was a difficult thing. But I felt very much like it was still my responsibility to try to keep him alive. And, you know, people don't realize that when you're in that kind of a situation where that carried on with me.
Yeah.
That it's like, okay, I've spent 30 years trying to keep him alive, you know, and to keep him alive for my kids was still an important thing for me. So it went on.
Like think, well, I left the situation so I wouldn't have to deal with that. Like, I mean, how did you feel about still having that obligation, but not the marriage? Did it help?
No, it was something, and the only reason I did it was because I felt very responsible to keep my children's father alive.
Oh, I meant, did it help you to not be in the marriage even though you were still caretaking?
Yeah, oh, absolutely, because I knew that, well, but it took me a few years. It really took me a few years to finally just say, you know what? And in fact, it was kind of funny because I was actually married to my third husband, and I'll tell that story of what happened there. But it was an argument over food storage.
Wow.
And it was like, you can't touch the food storage. And then he got my kids involved, and they're like, you can't have any of the food storage because you didn't put in the divorce decree. And I was just a whole bunch of different really crazy things. And I remember talking to my daughter, she's just chewing me out. And their dad had just chewed me out because I'm like, all I want to do is separate this food storage up to our children. Well, that's what we got at 4. So let's just separate it up for all the kids. And it turned out to be that I was trying to take it all. And it was kind of funny. And it was one of those moments. I was driving down the road. I was talking to him. He was chewing me out. Then my daughter called me. She was chewing me out. And I finally just started laughing. And I said, you know what? Thank you. Thank you. I'm talking to my daughter. And she's like, stop doing that, Mom. And I'm like, I really want to thank you because you finally just took that mantle off my shoulders and I don't have to do it anymore. So whatever happens to that food storage is between you and your father and your siblings. I don't have to do it anymore. I had tried so hard at that point for 35 years to make everybody happy and make it work. And I didn't want the food storage for myself. I wanted it to be divided up amongst my 6 children, that we had tents and everything that they could need for all 6 kids. And it came back to me that I was trying to steal it all. And I'm just like, wow, I'm done with that. So I called their dad and I said, I don't know why you decided to bring the kids in this and turn me into be the bad guy, but I'm done. I'm done. I will do nothing else. I will not touch it. I will not talk to you about it. I'm done. And it was like this weight of the world at that point in time, after all those years over food storage, was what finally did it, going, whew, I don't have to do this anymore. You know, and so it's kind of I know this is getting way off topic, but it was kind of funny because 2 years later, after their dad passed away, so I guess it was about 4 years after the dad passed away, my son came to me and he said, we went down to St. George to go get into the storage and get it all divided up. And Dad forgot to pay it, the storage unit. So it was all gone, all gone. It had been taken back and turned over and divided up by whoever bought the storage unit. So none of the kids got a thing of it. So it was really sad because they felt really bad. They're like, oh, you're going to be so mad. And I was like, you know what? That was not my responsibility anymore. So it was just kind of funny. It wasn't funny. It was sad because that was a lot of money, a lot of effort, and a lot of work to make sure that everybody had, all 6 kids had equal stuff. And then nobody ended up with any of it.
Yeah. So it sounds like it was a process to kind of get beyond.
It was. It wasn't something I wanted to let go. You know, I mean, that's not, I did, like you said before, I didn't get married to get divorced. You know, but I also didn't get married to be alone in my marriage either. And that was a very lonely marriage.
How long were you single after husband number 1, after that divorce?
Well, interesting. We were divorced our divorce came through in February. So we'd been about 5 months waiting for that to come through, still being very good friends. He had asked me to come back and try to make it work. And I did against everything in my gut telling me to. I did. And he came back down to Utah, and after about 3 days, he started talking suicide again. And I was like, I can't do it. You got to go. You got to leave. So it was really, really hard. So I was single for about 5 months. And I met a gentleman in Canada. And really at this point in time, and I want the listeners to hear this because it was really hard. He was a good man, I thought. And I was really excited because he said, do you want to change? This is how I proposed. Do you want to change your zip code? And coming off of what I was coming off of, and I knew that my first husband was asking me all the time, can we remarry? Can we remarry? Will you come back? Will you come back? And it's like, if I'm married again, then he can't do that. So of course I said, yes, let's get married. Okay. You know, arranged everything. We got married in October and I moved to Canada in January. And, you know, it was a really, really, really difficult marriage, And it was one of those rebounders. So be careful, you guys, when you're out there on the rebound.
I did the rebound second marriage, so yeah. I know what you mean.
A lot of us women do that. And just, you know, it's really interesting because I was in Canada for 3 years and I had the opportunity to be stripped down to nothing but my very, very bottom of my soul was all I had left. When it was to the point where I'm like, I'd rather go back to my first marriage than stay in my second marriage. It was pretty bad. But I got the opportunity to start my business up there, my hyperbaric oxygen business. I made very, very good friends up there that will be friends forever with me. My family is up there. My mom was born and raised in Lethbridge, and that's where I moved to. So I had a lot of family up there and a lot of really amazing experiences that I would not have had. So I was very, very grateful and careful to just go, yeah, I learned what it was like to be ripped to the very bottoms of my depths of my soul. And
I hear you
go,
on that.
what's that?
I hear you on that. I mean, I
Yeah,
lost
your story was a
everything.
lot the same.
Yeah, I lost everything, you know,
Yeah.
really kind of twice.
Yep. It's true. You know, and I think that a lot of us, especially people listening on your show, are in the same boat. We're in the same boat. You know, it's just like, why do we do this to ourselves? You know, but we have to have those learning experiences. And we are such better people because of it. I mean, it really, truly did change my life, especially when my son told me that about how I was not present in anything that they did in their lives. I was always there, but not present. That really hurt because I thought I was a really good mom and I was at everything. And from their perspective, I wasn't. And so for me, that was a real huge reality check. So when I crawled myself out of Canada, and I literally say crawled myself out of Canada because I was left with nothing, stripped down to nothing. And it was friends and family that sent me money to get a U-Haul and sent me money to get out of the country. And I literally took my little baby U-Haul with the very few things I had left in the world and crossed the border. And when I got out of crossed the border, I literally got out of that U-Haul and got on my knees outside the U-Haul and started sobbing and just telling Heavenly Father how grateful I was to get back into the United States and to start my life again. And that was, there were so many miracles that happened with all of that. And that's what took me to St. George. I came back to Pocatello for a couple of weeks with my mom to finish up some classes I was taking to get internationally certified with the light therapy. But then I ended up in St. George. And talk about another miracle, but saw some of the hardest times again that I went through because I was still dealing with a first husband. Now I was dealing with a second husband. I was dealing with children that were all very, very hurt through this whole thing. Very, very hurt. And trying to figure out if I deserved happiness or if it was up to my kids, you know, to show me what happiness was. And it took me a long time. And I was single about 6 years before. And it was funny because, and this is again for you listeners out there, I sat there and I thought, I need to be very specific on what I'm asking Heavenly Father for, because I was really, really tired of doing the dating scene and really tired of doing the single scene and really tired of doing the internet scene. And I was like, oh.
But I'm sure you didn't want to settle for.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
In fact, I promised myself I would not settle. I would never take that opportunity again to just change my zip code. You know, I really needed to find somebody that was my soulmate. And it was hard. It was really difficult because I was dealing with a lot of stuff with my kids and a lot of stuff with myself, trying to do as much counseling as I could and mental clearing. And I was in the health and wellness business. So I had the opportunity to work with other people that were in the health and wellness business too. And they really helped me with a lot of my physical, mental, emotional, spiritual stuff that I was going through.
You did a lot of personal work during those 6 years.
So much,
Yeah.
so much.
And that's
you
what
know,
we actually consider the first and most important part of intentional courtship is
Yes.
healing and finding yourself again and really understanding what you want and then not settling like, you know, you said you didn't want to do. Even if you're sick of the dating scene, even if you're sick of losses, you're willing to hold out for what's really best.
Right. You know, it's not like the opportunity wasn't there. It was there all the time. But it's like, I don't want to do this again. I'm not going to do this again. But I also, on the other hand, didn't want to be single for the rest of my life. I didn't want to get comfortable in the single life.
Mhm.
And that was really because I was becoming very comfortable in that single life.
So that,
And I
that was
knew that-
6 years before husband number 3.
Right. Right. And that was a lot of healing time. And it still is, still continues to go on. But I very specifically asked Heavenly Father at one point in time, I said, I don't want to meet somebody online. I don't want to meet somebody in the singles. I don't want to just bring somebody to me in the normal old fashioned way, just bring somebody into my life that I don't feel like I have to work so hard at, somebody that will just sweep me off my feet and will feel so great and everything will work out. And it was funny because the week later, after I had asked Heavenly Father for that, just really discouraged not discouraged, but just going, it's got to be something else here. And a client of mine, wasn't a client at that time, I didn't know him at that time, had been working on, he had just taken care of his father for 5 years. His father passed away at 102. And he was doing all of the caregiving himself, and he had torn his rotor cuff and he had hurt his knees, and they wanted to do surgery on his knees and his shoulder. And he was very into the holistic stuff also. And so he had been getting PRP injections. And then he asked his doctor, he's like, there's got to be something else that can happen here because it's not healing as fast as I want it to. And I'm not going to get surgery. And he said, what about hyperbaric? And the doctor said, absolutely, hyperbaric will help. And again, we talk about miracles all the time on our show, and you guys do too. And it was just the next morning, he was in his car driving someplace, and the spirit literally said, turn on the radio. He never listens to the radio when he's driving. And he turned off the radio, and it was at my show, my radio. I was live on the radio. And I was talking about what hyperbaric was doing for all of our clients, and he beelined it right to my office. And so when I got back from the radio station, because he beat me there, we started talking about what he needed and what he wanted. So I said, well, let's do 20 sessions. And it was kind of funny because I knew he was single, but I don't date clients, so that just kept very, very professional. And then he decided to do 20 more sessions. And I'm like, this guy's really nice. And, I've got this thing where I give all my clients a hug, everybody that comes in, whether they're in wheelchairs or walkers or, 90 years old or 10 years old, they get a hug. And so I started giving Ken a hug when he'd come in. And after about 25 sessions, 30 sessions, those hugs started getting a little bit longer and a little bit longer. And it's like, okay. So anyway, funny story, after he got done with his 40 sessions, I was asked to go to a group date with him and a bunch of other people to the Heritage Choir concert down there and to meet everybody for dinner. And so I did, but I didn't realize that it was supposed to be a date with him. So I brought a date.
Oh no, just 2 dates.
And it wasn't a group. There was just my partner and his wife and Ken and myself and my date.
Oh man.
So it was just kind of funny, is what we laugh about all the time now. But I'm like, you didn't ask me. And Doug asked me. He's like, well, it was going to be a date, but I said, well, so we ended up the 5 of us having dinner and then going to the concert. And then after the concert, my date left and went home. And then Ken calls the next morning and he's like, so how serious are you with this guy? Are you going to marry him or what? I said, oh, no, he just needed a friend. He was like, good, you want to go out tonight? So that was the start of a really incredible, fast relationship, but it was so perfect because I was actually moving to Salt Lake the next week to start my business up there. So I was going back and forth between Salt Lake and St. George, and he offered to move us up there. He's like, let me come and help you. And I'm like, yes.
I really want to insert a comment because that's something that we discuss as being really clear, whether it's a date or not.
Exactly.
That's a perfect example of what you can avoid if you're clear.
Yeah. Guys, ask if it's, and I should have, and I asked my partner, I said, is this a date or is this just a group thing? And he's like, oh, it's just a group thing. I'm like, oh, okay. So,
Okay.
but I didn't ask the person.
And it's good for women to try and clarify, but in that case you did, but it didn't quite translate.
It didn't translate. It didn't get in there, but it's a funny story, and it makes for a lot of laughing.
Yeah.
So we had only dated about 3 months, but we were together every day. I take that back. So I was in Salt Lake. He was in St. George, and don't do this, ladies, but I would go on dates every night in Salt Lake, and then I couldn't wait to get home to call him to talk to him. So he was used to going to bed about 9 or 10 because he'd go put his dad to bed, and he'd have to wait up for me to get home from my dates in Salt Lake until 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning. And then I'd have to call him to tell him all about my day. And it was not a good thing to do. Don't do that. Don't do that. But
how long did you and Ken date before you got married then?
we dated about 4 months.
Okay.
4 months, and it was just fast and magical and beautiful. And he had been single for 20 plus years, and he hadn't even started on the dating site singles again. He only 1 or 2, but I was so grateful that soon as we started dating, we knew that we were going to get married. It was just so easy. It was such an easy relationship with him.
Question about that. So, but you were still dating other people for
A lot. Yeah.
Not just because that was your habit, or
it was because I hated being alone, and I'd go to Salt Lake and I would spend the week there, and I'd have a date every night. And then I'd go back home to St. George, and I'd have a date every night. Then it's just what I would do because, my kids were gone, everybody was moved out. And it was just what I did to fill my time was go hang out with the singles, and go on as many dates as I could. I did that in high school too, though. So I guess it's one of those habits that come back, right? But it was hard because I had my businesses, and I was working so hard all the time. And it was just that was kind of my release after. But then I caught thinking, I don't want to be with anybody else but Ken. So why am I going out on all these dates? And I'm like, maybe you need to come to Salt Lake on the weekend or the week, because he was retired, taking care of his dad. And I'm like, just spend more time with me because we've got this crazy relationship going here between 2 cities, and so he did. He would come up and help me in the clinic, and it was awesome because he was an emotional healing coach, and he was helping my clients just tremendously. And then we got married, and it was funny because we didn't have the greatest relationship with some of my children. And so we were sitting there talking to some friends that came down from Canada, and they were at our house, and they said, why do you have to ask your kids? Because we're like, we probably should tell the kids that we're going to get married. And because my boys knew, because I have a good relationship with my boys, but I didn't tell my girls. And they're like, just elope, just go do it. Just don't, who do you have to ask? You don't have any parents around you have to ask, just go do it. So we called the bishop, and he said he had the next Tuesday open. And so we're like, done, let's do it. So then we told the children after the fact. My boys were there, but the girls weren't. And that was yucky. It was yucky. They were mean, but you know what? We had an incredible marriage until he got sick last August.
Before you move into that part of the story with Ken, I just want to clarify for those out there who are dating and wondering, when and how they might commit, because it sounds like you were ready when you first met him. But at one point you're just like, he's worth settling down for.
Exactly.
And did he initiate any of that? Did he say, you're driving me nuts, I don't want to stay up late waiting for you to tell me about your date? Or was
yes, we did have that conversation, and I didn't even realize what I was putting him through. I was just so excited to get off work and go on a date and go to the single stuff, and then come home and talk to him for 2 hours at 11 o'clock at night or 12 o'clock at night, and then started again the next day. I really didn't even, it was only about 2 weeks, and he said, Steph, I just can't do this. I can't stay up and wait for you and then hear about your dates. I'm like, oh dang, there probably really is not very cool of me to do that. I just was so excited. I wanted to talk to him, So yeah, sometimes we need to just take a breath and step back and go, okay, is this putting our relationship forward, or is this hurting our relationship? you know, but it was to the point where every night I'd get home and I'm like, all I want to do is talk to him,
Right.
you know, so what am I doing going out with all these other people?
So it kind of happened at the same time that he was like,
It did.
okay, all right, got it. Yeah.
It did very fast, but it did. It did. And then it's like, okay, now what do we do? And we weren't sure. He had his dad's house. I had my house. He's like, I don't want to keep my dad's house, you know? So I'm like, well, I have a great house. So you can, you know, move in here with me. We can get, he said, well, would you marry me? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I would. And that's where our friends were like, okay, you're going to get married anyway. Just go do it. You don't need to ask permission. You know, what do you need to do? You know, and it's like, oh, you're right. We don't have, it's us. We don't have to ask permission. You know, it was just such one of those aha moments, right?
Mhm.
Because I think a lot of us that are on our second and third marriages are like, well, we still need to tell all the kids, and we need to tell all the family, we need to blah, 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 blah. No, you don't.
And
No,
so
you don't.
eloped with your bishop, is that right?
We eloped with our bishop, and we actually ended up having two of my kids there, when my office manager and two of his siblings were there and their spouses. So I guess it wasn't really an elopement. It was, okay, be here by Tuesday at this time, you know, but we didn't need to tell everybody or invite everybody. It just wasn't, I'd already done that and it didn't turn out so good. So like,
It's almost like you wanted to do something different.
yeah, it really didn't matter to me at that point in time. You know, it's like, I want to be married to this man and he wants to be married to me, and we're going to get this done. Now, on that point, I didn't have my temple ceiling canceled. So it took us a while to get that done. And it was, again, you know, that takes time, and we didn't want to wait to get married to get that all done.
Yeah.
And
and if
Just
you'll
for
rem-
the
oh.
listeners, that's faster now.
Oh, much
President
much
Monson
faster.
really streamlined that, and it's
Yeah.
not the cumbersome long wait that it used to be.
Yeah, well, and I
And the
mentioned,
spouse doesn't have the choice, can't argue with it anymore, which is good.
in the book Intentional Courtship, I talk about my experience having, like, in a way, it was a little miracle in my life to have met a singles ward bishop who encouraged the women to get their temple ceilings canceled if the temple marriage is what they wanted. And I just remember thinking, there's a reason I met him and heard that, and I started the process, and I did it before. And I think that was, like, for me, opening space and setting an intention.
Right.
And then when Jeff and I got back together after our year of friendship, we were just like, that was in place. And that
Right.
was so much easier for us to move forward and create it pretty quick, you know.
And they didn't used to let you do that. You used to had to wait till you were getting married.
Well, and
before they
even
do
like my
that.
bishop at the time, he's like, we can't do that. I'm like,
Right.
I promise you can't. Because I kept in touch with that other bishop, and he's like,
Yeah.
I promise you can. I have him look into it. It's like I kind of had to, like, get everyone on board with the fact that it could happen.
Yeah, re-education. Re-education makes a big difference. So yeah, we did have to wait for that, which, you know, is funny because my second marriage, that was never even talked about. It was never discussed, you know, and so it's like, wow, okay. So, but for Ken, it was discussed, and it was a very important for both of us and for him. And of course, there's a lot of other stories behind my first husband just fighting me and telling me he'd never let me get a temple divorce. And so I was so grateful when it came through that his choice didn't matter.
Right.
It was between me and what my worth was, and being able to do it this way. So we had to wait and wait and wait. And we were really anxious to get our ceiling done. And we finally got my cancellation the day they closed the temples. And I bawled all day.
Are you talking about COVID?
Yes.
COVID closing.
Yes. So
my sister went through the week before, and she like moved mountains to get there. She felt really strongly about it. And she'd had a recommend back in, I don't know if it was Africa or China, but before she moved to the States, she had a recommend, and she didn't know she had to do it within 30 days. She thought she had 2 years, and she had to, like, go through all these hoops to get a new one. Anyway, but she made it happen, and then all the temples shut down. So, like,
wow,
hers was kind of just the opposite. Like, she barely made it in the nick of time.
Well, you know, talk about miracles though, because I was so upset. I'm like, after waiting all this time, and then the temples closed the same day.
Yeah. Oh, and for her,
And-
just to clarify, it was an endowment of her own.
of her
It was
own.
not their sealing gift.
Okay, right.
But
Which
anyway.
is huge, you know, you
Yeah.
want to get that done. And so we had to wait and wait and wait. And I just kept saying, just don't you dare let anything happen to you until we can get sealed, you know. Now moving forward, those words were a little bit more real
Yeah.
to me, because, you know, I kind of, as a joke to him, I'm like, don't you let anything happen to you until we get sealed, you know. And so we did get sealed. It was a little bit over a year later because how long it
so glad
took
to hear
and
that.
everything. So it was really awesome.
Good. So a little over a year, you said?
Yeah. And the other miracle with that was we had called the temple over and over and over, kept checking. Can we please just sneak in? Can we just go do this? You know, and she says, you're the first on our list. Of course, now I'm in St. George, and the St. George temple is closed now for renovation. And so Cedar City was the next closest. It's a tiny, tiny temple. And they called the day that they opened, 2 days before they opened, they said, we're going to be open on this day. You can have 6 people with you. I said, I have 6 siblings, and so does he. We've got all these people. 6 for a marriage for us is not going to happen for us, you know? And she's like, well, you can either take it or leave it. I'm like, oh, we'll take it. Okay. So we're hurrying and trying to get everything together and ready to go. And we're like, okay, who do we ask? Who are the 6 that get to come? You know, because in our family, you know, you get the biggest room to even fit your family in. And so it was just interesting because it's like, you know what, that's not what it's about. It's about us being able to be sealed for eternity, you know. And again, the miracle that was we were the only ones in the temple. And the night before, they called us and told us that we could have 16 people. The night before. So we're calling all these people that we told couldn't come and trying to see if we could come. We actually ended up having 10. And we got in there, and it was just such a neat experience because, you know, the temples are really busy. Those of you that are listeners that haven't been in the temple, it's busy, 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 busy. There's a lot of things going on at the same time. We were the only ones in that temple.
Wow.
There was nobody else in there. It was the 10 of us, Ken and I, our sealer, his assistant, and the security guard. That was it. And it was such a spiritual, incredible moment. I remember them taking me into the bride's room, and she said, this will be the last time you'll ever be in the bride's room because you will never be the one getting married again. And she goes, I bet the first time it was crazy. I said, yeah, there was 14 marriages there the first time I went through 36 years ago. She goes, it's all about you right now. So I got to sit in that bride's room and just feel the spirit was so strong. And she goes, you know what, honey, take your time. You've got 5 minutes. I'm like, oh, okay, take my time. I've got 5 minutes, because they were just, you know, back to back to back to back, trying to fit everybody in. But it was such an incredible, incredible experience that I know that was a gift from Heavenly Father, because had it been busy and open like it always is, it wouldn't have had that feeling of just the sacredness of it. And I remember we were all standing there waiting to leave the building, because they have to take you out in a group and bring the next one in from the backside, right? Because of COVID and the rules. And I remember standing there, and I remember the sealer says, you are entering out the east doors of the temple. And the spirit was so overwhelming to me. I looked at Ken, I said, Christ is going to be standing right out there. We're going out the east doors to meet Christ. And just the spirit was so strong. And I thought that never would have happened had it not been the way it was. And as soon as they opened those doors and the light came in those doors, and you could just feel that spirit enveloping us, it was the most incredible experience. And then we stepped outside the temple, they shut the doors, and the wind about blew us off the mountain there. But we did get some pictures. Everything's flying this way, but we did get pictures. But it was, which is another miracle, because they weren't letting you do pictures until that morning. They finally said that we could. So beautiful, beautiful experience. And, you know, I'm going to get teary-eyed here, because I had the privilege of being married to Ken for 2.5 years. I'm so grateful for all the little things that happened, because he became my protector. He says, Steph, nobody else is going to hurt you again. like they have in the past, and I'm not going to let them. And for me to have somebody step up and protect me was a miracle for me. And in August, when he got released, he got COVID. And from the time he got sick, and you have to remember, he and I are in the health and wellness industry, and he doesn't go to doctors. He just doesn't get sick. So for him to get sick and pass away in 5 days was just beyond anything I could even imagine. But we had such amazing miracles while he was in the hospital. He was only in there a day and a half. And as soon as I took him, I knew he would be coming home. But the miracle one was that I was able to go in the room with him because they had no beds. So they put him in the triage room. And because they put him in the triage room, they let me go in with him. And they kept saying, if he goes into the main part of the hospital, you'll never be able to go in with him. And they never did get a bed open. So I was able to stay with him the whole time. And it was so interesting because as we were in there and I'm fighting, I did everything I could. Being in the industry I'm in, I talked to all my doctor friends. I talked to my pharmacist. I was talking to everybody. What else can I do? What else can I do? What else can I do? And when I got there, the doctor's like, Steph, you did everything you could have done. And I needed that confirmation because I'm like, why with everything I'm doing is he not getting better? And then we sat there one night and his kids are kind of estranged from him. And the first night we were there, we had talked the week before about how is he going to be able to influence his children? How's he going to be able to help his children? What can he do to make sure his kids are okay through all the tribulations and the things that are happening? He hadn't talked to them for almost 20 years. And we were sitting in the hospital and he looks over at me and he says, Steph, it's me that has to go. I have to pass over so I can be there to influence my children from the other side. And I was like, what? And he goes, I have to pass to the other side so I can help my children. And the spirit just flooded me going, oh my gosh, you're right. You're right. And then I'm just going, why am I even having this conversation? It was kind of one of those incredible spiritual experiences, but the reality of what was happening was starting to hit me. And then the next day on Sunday, it was just such a beautiful, tender moment because I looked at him and I said, honey, you need to call all your family and your friends, the ones that are closest to you, because you need to tell them goodbye and you need to tell them thank you. And for me, I was going, where is this coming from? I felt like the spirit was just guiding everything that was happening, and when the doctor came in and said that he wasn't going to make it unless he got life-flighted to Pocatello and put on a ventilator, and, he'd probably be 6 months on that. And then he'd probably be another 6 to 8 months of if he survived, he'd be another 6 to 8 months on rehabilitation. And he takes off his mask and takes off all the equipment. And he looks at the doctor and he goes, where in any of that would I want to do that? Because you are not doing that to me. And I thought, what a blessing that wasn't me having to make that decision. That was his choice. And the doctor kept saying, do you want to do this? I'm like, you heard him. I'm not going against his choice. That's his choice. And so Sunday night, I got on the phone and I called all of his siblings and he got to say goodbye to them and tell them that he loved them and his friends. And it was just such a beautiful moment. I kept thinking, people don't get this opportunity. They don't get to say their goodbyes like this, because the week before he was healthy and strong and doing all the teaching Sunday school and doing all the things that he normally does. And then they decided to put him on hospice and he wanted to come home. He's like, Steph, I want to go home. I want to go home. And just before he was we took him to the hospital. I had to call a couple of the elders quorum to come over and help me get him to the car because I couldn't get him to the car. And the one gentleman gave him a blessing and it said very simply, your body will be healed and you will go home. I thought, okay, his body's going to be healed and he'll go home. So that Monday morning, we were talking and he's like, Steph, I want you to remarry and I'm going to help you find somebody. And I was looking at him going, we are not having this conversation right now. And he goes, Stephanie, I'm going to help you find somebody. I want you to be happy and I don't want you to go through this alone. Okay, I can't right now. I mentally can't handle this right now. I'm watching my husband die. I can't do this. Anyway, he sat up in bed. We'd waited for a hospice and they didn't get there and didn't get there and didn't get there. And he finally sat up in bed and he took everything off. And they told me once he took everything off that he would die within 35 to 40 minutes. And he took everything off. And he goes, Steph, I need to tell you something. And I said, okay, what's that? In a very strong voice, not the weak voice he had. And he sat there and he goes, when I pass over tonight and get to the other side of the veil, I have a whole bunch of work to do. I'm going to be very busy. And he said, I need you to listen because I'm going to be giving you instructions of what you need to do on this side of the veil. He said, you have a lot of work to do, Stephanie, and so do I. And he said, will you promise me that you'll listen? And this is again another one of those miracles because I started laughing. And I said, are you saying I don't listen? And he looks at me. And again, one of those tender mercies, he started laughing in his really strong, powerful laugh that he always had. And he said, sometimes you get distracted and you forget to listen.
Don't we all, right?
I know. And he says, honey, I need you to listen. And I said, I will listen. I'll do the best I can to listen. And he goes, good, because I'm going to be giving instruction. He goes, I want you to know I love you. And I said, I love you back. And he laid back. And a few hours later, he was gone. And it was just so many miracles that happened while he was in the hospital. And I know he was ready to go. I know he is doing a lot of work over there. And anyway, just really quickly, I was trying to have a lesson on the listening thing. And it was after his funeral was over. And I had lost my earbuds. I could not find them anywhere. This was before he ever got sick. And so I'm sitting there on my bed 2 days after the funeral and everybody was gone. And those of you that have been through this know what that first day of nobody there with you was like. Even though I'd been single for 6 years, it was so different having somebody gone that I love so dearly. And I felt, and I'm, as you said, I flit. I do things fast all the time. But I could feel Ken's spirit in the room, in the bedroom, and he was flittering all over. And I'm like, okay, Ken, stop. What are you trying to tell me? You know, this is 2 days after his funeral. And when we first started dating, he's like, Steph, I need you to give me some Ken time. Just at 7 o'clock at night, shut your stuff off. You need to be with me. I just want some Ken time. And that's the first time in my life I had been told it was okay to stop and just relax and spend time with him, because I had been taking care of my family and taking care of everything for so long that he taught me that. And so I'm sitting in the bedroom, I'm hearing this spirit is flitting around me, and I'm like, what are you doing? Calm down, you know. And so he sits, I felt him sit next to me. Again, he's in spirit. I felt his hand come over my hand, and I looked at the clock, and it was 7 o'clock. It was Ken time. And it was just that confirmation for me that I know he was there and everything was okay. And so after he left, I said, oh, by the way, you can help me find my iPod, please, or my iPads. I can't find my earbuds. I don't know where they are. That night I had a dream, and I heard his voice say, look under the couch in the living room. So that I wrote it down. So I was too tired to get up out of bed. The next morning I got up and lifted up the cushion, and there was my earbuds under the cushion.
Well, tell him to come help me find mine, because they're missing too.
I know they're gone again. I think he's taken them and he's playing. But it was so interesting. Yeah, he loves to do stuff like that to me. But you know, we talked about the difference between finding love after divorce and finding love after death. And they're so different. They're so different because divorce, generally it's okay. You may want to stay friends, you may not want to, but you're done. You're done.
Right.
And it's like, I'm ready to move on. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm finished with this. But when you lose somebody that you have felt like is your soulmate and you've lost them, it's a whole different story. And I was just trying to go, I don't want to date again. I don't want to do this singles thing again. But I didn't want to be alone either. I'm like, I don't want to be alone through these tribulations that are coming and that we're already dealing with. And I just want somebody to share my life with. I'm still very young and very healthy and very strong and just want to have somebody to come hang out with me. But I was fighting it. And remember when I told you, Ken said you need to listen because I've got things to tell you. Well, I chose not to listen for a while. And his best friend and his wife came to my house one night, probably about a month after Ken had passed, about 5 weeks after Ken had passed. And she is an intuitive. She speaks to spirits on the other side. And she says, I have a message for you from Ken. And he says to tell you you're not listening. And I start laughing. And I said, well, you tell him to get the insurance to pay, to take care of the car insurance, to get the bank account situated, because all this stuff I had done over and over and over, and I couldn't get any of it finished. And I was so mad. And she looks over her shoulder and she goes, did you hear that? I said, oh, I know he's right there. I know he's right there. I can feel him. And she goes, well, he wants to give you a message. Are you ready to listen? And I said, what is it? Kind of agitated because I couldn't get this other stuff done. And she said, he wants you to know that he loves you and he's finding somebody for you. And it's going to be somebody that's going to be ready for you. And I was like, what does that mean? Do I have to start dating again? I was just so frustrated. I'm like, I don't want to do this again, but I also knew that Heavenly Father didn't want me to be alone. And so I'm like, oh, okay. So, but it took me about a month to get myself together, and I got myself on a couple of the dating sites, and it was crazy because the first week I was proposed to 6 times, and I'm like, I'm not moving all these different places. I need somebody that will come here. And so I finally said to Montpelier, I finally said to Heavenly Father, I said, I need this, 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 and this, and somebody that will move to Montpelier, Idaho, because I'm not going anywhere. You brought me here for a reason, and I'm not going anywhere.
Well, and so when Ken was alive, you both had the prompting to move there.
Yes. And thank you. That is something very important because COVID, as horrible as it was, it closed my business in St. George. And at the same time I was doing my local radio show, I was offered to be a host on this international show that I do now. And I could do it from anywhere. And it was just all these beautiful things were all falling into place. And then when we moved to Idaho, it wasn't easy because he's like, I'm not going unless I'm getting something's telling me I'm going. And we'd been up back and forth 2 or 3 times. And finally we were pulling into this specific place in Idaho, and the spirit just took over both of us. And we're like, oh, this is where we're supposed to be. So again, there was all these things that Heavenly Father was putting in place, because I know had Ken passed away while I was in St. George, I was so into all my other world, it would not have been the same. And when he passed away, we literally moved into our house in May, and he died in August.
Wow.
And that community rallied around me and still rallies around me. And everybody in the area just have been there supporting of me beyond anything I could even imagine.
So he did end up living long enough for you to be sealed and for you to move where you needed to be.
Exactly. It was why he was part of why he was brought into my life. And I know that. And then in November, I got online, and this guy thought
he died in August.
He died in August.
Okay.
And it was a really hard decision for me because that wasn't very long, but
3
the
months.
spirit just kept working on me. Get online, get online. It was about the end of October. So get online. I'm like, I don't want to do this. But I finally one night I thought, okay, I'm going to get on. And I was praying, which sites do I get on? Which sites do I get on? because unfortunately I didn't have some very good experiences on the LDS sites. So I got on the eHarmony and I got on one of the other LDS sites, and it was so crazy because I'm like, you guys are all proposing to me. You've never met me. You have no idea what my life is like. Do you really, you don't want to marry me without this, you know? Anyway, it was just crazy. It was just crazy. And then in October, just before Thanksgiving, I got a message from this guy, and he says, hey, you know, I'm headed to Kentucky for a couple weeks for Thanksgiving. Maybe when I get back, we can talk. And I thought, well, he's kind of cute. I said, okay, well, I've got some people that live there, some family that live there. They're on a mission there. And he's like, well, where? And I said, I don't know. I got to find out. And that was it. Nothing else. So I went through all this, and the holidays are coming closer, and I'm like, I don't want to do Christmas by myself. I don't want to do, you know, but I had like 3 guys say they were going to come out and spend Christmas with me, and then things fell through, and it was just crazy. It was a crazy whirlwind of emotion.
And I think it was right around this time we met.
Yeah.
And what's funny is we were on the phone, and because we were like talking and we knew where you were on the freeway, you beelined it to our house.
That was so funny. Like, where are you? Well, this is like, well, turn off right now. I'm like, whoop, over all 5 lanes. And
yeah, so it was like the fall of last year, and you were saying, and you got a copy of Intentional Courtship.
Yeah.
And I remember you saying something. What's that?
It was a great book. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so me.
But I remember you saying something like, is this going to help get me a husband?
I did. I did say that.
So
like,
did
okay,
it?
What have you got? What have you got for me? Like, and it was at that point in time, it was like, okay, I know I have to do this. So I've got to put my focus on this and make sure that I'm doing it right. So I think it was pretty close after I talked to you guys. I'm like, and I was reading your book, and it was great. You guys need to get this book if you have not gotten it, because it's going to take you on this roller coaster. Like you're, whoa, okay, I've been there, done that. Anyway, it was a great book. But I sat there and I thought, okay, I need to have intention. What is my intention? So I had this frank conversation with Heavenly Father, because we do that a lot. And I said, I need you to do this, 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 and this. This is what I need. And I need somebody that is willing to move to Montpelier, Idaho. I said, how am I going to find that, Heavenly Father? But I'm turning it over to you, because you said I'm supposed to do this. And I knew it, and I felt it. And then John had sent that message to me. And then, so after I got done, it was almost Christmas. It was like the 16th of December. And I'm sitting there going, okay, I had 3 guys coming for Christmas. They've all backed out. My friend was going to come spend Christmas with me. She had a cousin pass away. All my kids, well, a couple of my kids were going to come. They decided I'll go to St. George, and I was just feeling sorry for myself. So I thought, I wonder whatever happened to that guy that sent that message to me. So I just sent him a message back and said, hey, how was your trip? Simple. And he sends back and said, hey, you're still single? Can I talk to you? It was kind of funny. He's like, I thought you'd be long gone. You know, that was in October November. Anyway, it was so funny because he called the next night, and we start crying again. He called the next night, and we talked for like 4 hours. And I'll tell you, my spirit was just being fed. And I'm like, oh, what's going on here? It was just really weird. And then the second night we talked, which was about 17th of December, we started talking, and I'd been praying, and I'm like, Ken, is this who you sent me? Because it feels like this is who you sent me. And that next night we were talking, and John said something, and I took a gasp of air, and I started crying, and John's like, what's wrong? And I said, that was Ken's words. Those were Ken's words. And he goes, what did I say? And I said, I don't know what you said, but they were Ken's words. And it was just this confirmation that came to me. And then the next day, when we were talking the next night, it happened again. And he said something else that was Ken's words. And we can't remember what he said, but that was on about the 18th and 19th. And he asked me if he could come see me after Christmas. And then he called back and he said, hey, can I come before Christmas? Because I'm going to go up to Kalispell, see my kids. And as he got talking, and we were day 3 or day 4, we were just like, he just felt like he was meant for me. It was just everything that we believed in and everything that we wanted and everything that I'm like, Heavenly Father, I want this, 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 and this. And he was it. And then he said, you know, I'm not tied to my house. I can sell my house. I'd be happy to move to Montpelier. He said, but God told me I'm supposed to be in the mountains by the lake. And I said, guess what? I have mountains and a lake. And so he came on the 20th of December and he pulled it. We hadn't seen each other. We'd only talked on the phone. We hadn't Skyped. We hadn't physically seen each other. We hadn't even seen video of each other. But the spirit was so strong. And he walked into my house and he's like, these are my mountains. This is my lake. This is where we're supposed to be. And I'm like, yeah, it is. So we left for Kalispell 2 days later. And he said, will you go to Kalispell with me? I said, will you come to a concert with me? And he goes, I'll come to a concert with you if you'll come to Kalispell with me. Which is, for me, was really difficult because I had this PTSD from my second marriage where I don't go in other people's cars. I go by myself, or I'll take my car with my keys, with my money, because I'm never going to be left stranded again. And that was kind of a game that was played in Canada with me. And for me to sit there and say, yes, I'll come with you in your car.
Like that just came out of my mouth.
To Kalispell, Montana. And I'm like, did I just commit to that? And it felt so right. It felt so right. And on our way driving there, he's like, well, before that, he says, can I tell you that I love you? I'm like, well, if you weren't going to, I was going to tell you, but I thought I'd wait for you. I mean, this is 4 days into this relationship, you know, but it was so, with Ken, it was so easy. And I kept saying, you know, he set the bar so high. And I think where you come off of a relationship with somebody that you're completely in love with, and you know that he was in love with you, you want somebody that knows what that's like. And John, unfortunately, his wife had died last year also. And he loved her so much. And when we first, so I went to Kalispell with him and he says, would you marry me? I'm like, yeah, I've known you 4 days. Sure, I will. But it felt like we'd known each other forever. And he knew, and I knew that our spouses, his wife, Deb, and my husband, Ken, were very much part of this, bringing us together with Heavenly Father's blessing. They were pulling strings right and left. And it was so beautiful to meet somebody that had a true love of his wife. In fact, when we got to Boise, we went from Kalispell to Boise. He says, can I take you over to her grave? Because I want you to see her grave, because that's where I will be buried. Which I thought was so tender. I'm like, absolutely, let's do that. And I said, because I will be buried with Ken in Montpelier. And we have our grave there too. And, you know, it was just such a beautiful thing because he had gone through a really bad divorce with his first wife and then was married to his last wife who died in January. And so he could relate to the same things that I'd been through too. You know, we all have our stories, but he could relate to it.
You both had both kinds of losses.
We both did. We both had those. And, you know, and now to be married in later years again, you know, and still the death of my husband was still so new, but he was still going through some firsts with his wife too. And so we were able to work them out together and to be there for each other when those firsts are coming. I still haven't had my first anniversary. He just passed his on May 8th. And, you know, so there's a lot of things that we're working with together. And I'm so grateful because we weren't afraid of it. You know, it was kind of funny because we were driving back from Boise and he's like, well, let's just get your ring. I'm like, okay. So we got a ring. And then on our way back on New Year's Eve, he's like, well, when can we get married? He's like, can we get married like tomorrow? And I said, well, since both of our spouses died in 21, maybe we should wait till 22. Just in my mind, that's what I'm thinking, which is going to be, yeah, just we lost him in 21, you know, even though it's only a few months into 21 or end of 21. But anyway, so he's like, okay, well, can we get married maybe tomorrow on New Year's Day? I'm like, well, it is a Saturday and it is a holiday, so probably not. I said, but let me call my bishop. And I was so scared to tell my bishop. It's like, he's going to say, Stephanie, what are you doing? You're crazy. But he already knows that. So I called him.
The same bishop or a different bishop? With the one
It's our bishop that we know, completely different. We only had this
because you
bishop
had
since
moved.
May.
That's
and
right.
He died in June, right? And it was the day of his funeral. Our poor bishop did 3 funerals that day. I mean, it was during the COVID crisis and all the big crazy. And so when I called him and I said, well, we want to get married. And he said, oh, I'm so glad. He goes, I've done 18 funerals this year and I'd love to do a wedding. I've not done one. And I'm like, well, can we be your first? And he goes, well, I'm available on Monday night at 6 o'clock. This is on Saturday. I said, okay, we'll take it. So we did. So we had to go to courthouse and get our paperwork, and we invited about 10 people that were our very, very close nucleus friends. It was interesting because, you really find out who your friends are when you go through stuff, and even though COVID was yucky and it took his life, there was a lot of people that wouldn't, and the funerals were open, they could come, but they didn't. And I had, when I was preparing for the funeral, I had about 150 people that were going to come, but then they decided COVID, and I ended up with about 30 there. And it was really interesting because it really made me stop and go, who's there for me? Who's there? But that left a lot of room for the angels, and the angels filled that church. Yeah. It was amazing, that funeral home. But anyway,
which day did you end up getting married then? Was it the 1st or the
3rd?
The 3rd.
The 3rd on Monday.
Monday the 3rd of this year.
Of 2022. Yeah. And actually, he's so amazing. We're sitting in Florida right now at his condo, and he's like, hey, it's yours now too. You want to come with me? And I'm like, yes, I do. So, yeah. So, I guess for me, it's really funny because I have another friend that's been she's been single for 27 years. And when she found out we got married, she texted me, she goes, how did you do that? She goes, I've been looking for 27 years. I can't find anybody. I don't know what to do, blah, blah, blah. And I said, are you being very specific in your ask? You need to be very specific, and you need to be the person you want to marry. Mm-hmm. Are you the person you want to marry?
So I said,
yeah. So she just got married. They knew each other for 2.5 weeks, and she's like, he was perfect. And she called and she goes, oh my goodness, I did what you did.
That's great.
But I wouldn't have done it if I didn't hear what you had to say. Okay, sorry, Jeff. What were you going to ask?
Well, I was going to ask you what your specific ask was, what you were specifically looking for.
Well, for me, I know what Heavenly Father's plan is for me because He's told me. And one of the first things that John asked me, he said, Stephanie, are you a prepper? Those of you that are listening will know what that is. Those of you that don't know what that is, you don't know what it is. And I said, I'm not a doomsdayer by any means, but I am prepping because the Lord's told us to be prepared. And He knew what that was. And that just in my head went, He knows what that is, and He's like, well, so am I. And so we started talking about that. I'm like, oh, that is so cool. And I said, I need somebody that's on the same page that is understanding what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's not only prepping for food, prepping for, the supplies and stuff, but it's prepping because I know that I'm going to be one of the people that's going to help people survive during these tribulations through what I do with my business. And that was huge for me to have somebody else understand why my business is as important as it is, because I have been told through the Spirit that will be what will keep people alive during the tribulations. And it's like, I need somebody on that same page. And then most importantly, I need somebody that knew God and had a relationship with Jesus Christ. And it's been so important to me. And okay, I'm just going to say this. He's not a member of the church, but he knows God and he knows Christ. And it was beautiful. And he did not know that for a long time. But when his wife went missing and he was putting up posters all over to find her, and he went into the Eagle Christian Church in Boise, and he heard all these women singing, and he went in there to ask if he could put flyers up of his wife, and they asked if they could pray for him. And they all surrounded him and prayed for him. That was the first time since he was 13 he'd been in a church. And it changed his life. And he knew and knows who God is and who Christ is. And we have the most incredible conversations talking about that. And he said, Steph, I'll go to church with you if you go to church with me. And I've had the privilege of going to a lot of different denominations of churches. My dad and mom always said, go and learn about it, see what you think, go feel the spirit that's there, and so that wasn't an unusual thing for me. And it's been absolutely beautiful because he has got such a strong belief in God and Christ, and that was vital to me. And the fact that he said, I'll sell my house and move to Montpelier. I've got to be by the mountains and a lake. And I'm like, I have that.
I want exactly what you have.
I know. So it was such a neat experience to know that I had turned it over to God. This is what I need, Heavenly Father. And I don't want to be alone. And he didn't either. And he had a similar ask. He had COVID really bad in October, and he was sitting there on his couch with his dog and saying, God, what am I supposed to do? And God told him to get back in the saddle and start looking, because he was preparing somebody for him. And it's like, oh, I know who was. Ken and Deb had a huge hand in it. So I feel like really strongly, if we can just put our burdens in God's hands, Christ wants to take them. So let him take him, and then remember not to take him back. Because I'm really good at that.
That's yes. And that we call that putting the rock back down, when you're burdened and you put it down and then it comes back, you put it down again.
Yeah.
And I remember you saying, because I guess there were some people who were critical of the timing of your relationship and how fast you got married. And I remember you telling me, and probably plenty of other people, when you ask for something very specific and God gives it to you, you don't throw away that opportunity. You right. Go for it. And that's, that takes a lot of faith. And I think that's a perfect way of putting maybe anything that we are inspired to do through the Spirit that might not seem like the standard answer for anyone else.
Right. It's interesting that you say that, because we really did. Both of us went through a lot, and I had one of my very, very dear friends. She's like, Stephanie, if it's right now, it's going to be right in 6 months. And I just looked at her and I said, okay, if you ask God for this, 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 and this, and he gives it to you, he hand delivers this to you, do you say, thank you, now let me give it 6 months and see if it's right? No, you don't do that. He wouldn't have done that. He wouldn't have brought that person to you. So I'm like, you know what? Let's work out the things that we need to work out, but we're going to do this together as a team.
Yeah.
And we've had, I wish we had another hour, because we have had so many miracles with our spouses, literally, that has saved our lives. On one occasion, Deb told Ken, move the car. They're going to get hit. Our car lifted and moved. And we got done and we're like, okay, we need to go say a prayer right now, because literally our car was lifted and moved. And we were inches from being just nailed, T-boned. And both of us felt so strongly. We know Deb and Ken had a hand in that. So if it's not right and it's not what's supposed to be, that wouldn't be happening. But we knew without a doubt, Heavenly Father brought us together and used the people in our lives that we had, that our loved ones, to help it with it. Mm-hmm. So we've been extremely blessed.
Well, that's been a great narrative. I mean, I think that's been a really fun journey for it to hear, like from beginning to end of the question Jeff initially asked you, which is, tell us about your love, your losses. That's what this episode is about. And so many of our listeners can relate whether they've experienced divorce or widowhood, or maybe a few may have experienced even both like you have. And that's like kind of mainly what we wanted to like maybe wrap up this podcast with, is some questions about the similarities. So that we can relate, you know, when we're single and we've lost, whether it be to death or divorce, the similarities between death and divorce that you've, you know, noticed, and the differences. Like, we'd like to be able to honor both and be able to relate better, because a lot of people end up dating someone who might have had a different experience, and it's good for us to understand.
Right. That's such a good question, Cathy. Thank you. Because the similarities was, I loved every one of those men. I was committed to every one of those men, and I learned so much from every one of those relationships. And I never look at them as a negative. I look at them as an absolute learning opportunity. Some of those were difficult lessons, but that's what we learned from also, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they were all so important in my life to bring me to where I am right now. And as I said before, my husband that passed away, it was so funny because I was telling everybody, how in the world am I ever going to find anybody? Because he set the bar so high, you know. And for me, for only having him for 2.5 years, who knows what that would have been like, you know, 20 years down the road or 30 years down the road. But what was important, that I did have him for 2.5 years of magic. And it's like, that's what I want again. And I had it. And I need somebody else that knows what that's like, so that they can have the magic too. And for me, and sometimes that's not always the case, but I wanted somebody else that experienced similar things that I had experienced. You know, nothing's the same. Everybody's story is different, but there's also incredible learning opportunities through them. And when Heavenly Father brought John to me, and he had these similar experiences, and he was willing to step in, and it was really kind of interesting, because I know you have a lot of LDS people in your listening. I've never been on that other side, because for me, it's like, you're going to marry a non-member? What are you going to do? On his side, he's like, you're going to marry a Mormon? Seriously, don't marry a Mormon. Don't marry somebody that's LDS. What are you doing? You know, I'm like, okay, I don't know how to do that on that side of it, because I never thought of it on that side of it, you know. But it's been so incredibly great, because we respect each other's beliefs. We respect each other so much. And I say that Ken set the bar very, very high, but he brought John into my life. That's right there, and pushing us up, you know, just wanting us to be there and rise. And we've had a lot of discussion about what's going to happen when we do die. John's so cute. He's like, okay, I just want you to stay with me for 31 years. And at the end of 31 years, if you don't want to be married to me, we can reevaluate. I'm like,
why 31 years?
Well, he said 30 because that's how long I was married to my first husband. Then he goes, okay, I got to make it longer than that. So let's do it 31. That is so dang cute. I'm like, but you know, I really feel like Heavenly Father's plan, and maybe I'm way out of line saying this, but I feel that the love is so incredible on the other side of the veil, that those of us that are important in our lives will be together. We will be together. I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know how, but I have had incredible feelings and blessings that, you know, John and I will be together. Ken and I'll be together. Deb will be part of it. We've got all these incredible people that we brought into our lives, that we will all be together, because that's God's plan.
So you don't worry about how it's going to work. You just believe it will, and you value those relationships that you built here. Right.
God has it figured out. I mean, who are we to question? You know, I just feel like if he wouldn't have brought John into my life, there was a reason. There's a reason he's the one that was brought into my life. And I feel we've only been married 4 months now, and I've learned so much from him. And it's just been such an incredible experience. I'm like, there's times I just sit back and go, wow, thank you, Heavenly Father, because I've got such a different, and I have to share this with you really quickly, because I know we're running short on time. But it was really interesting because John says, Stephanie, the thing that concerns me the most is what if you are rejected by your religion because you're married to me?
Say that again.
He said, what if you're rejected
Oh,
by the people in your church because you're married to me? Never thought about that. That's never come into my mind that that would happen, you know, but we're always like, ooh, you know, he's not a member. But you know what? He knows God and he loves God and he knows Christ and he loves Christ. And that's what's important to me. And sometime we have time, I'll tell you about another story about Christ, but we're just short on time. So I want our listeners out there to remember, talk to Heavenly Father, have him guide you. You know, that's so important to have him guide you in your choices and your decisions, because he knows the rest of the story. We don't, you know, and he knows who we are to be with and who's to be in our life. We don't. And we just have to have that faith, and we have to have that blessing. I had so many priesthood blessings, and I was like, yes, this is right. This is the man I have learned from. I've learned so much from him. And I think he's learned a little bit from me too. But you know, it's just great to be able to step into somebody else's world and go, this is incredible, because it's all based on Christ's love.
Stephanie, how old were you when you married Ken?
Oh, geez, now you're going to make me figure out my dates, huh? I was 54. Was I 54 or 55? I must have been 55 when we got married.
So I married Cathy at 50 as well, so I have some appreciation of that.
Yeah.
How did you keep your hope and optimism alive during 2 divorces and, you know, difficult marriages and so forth?
Oh, Jeff, that's such a good question. You know, one thing that never wavered was making sure that I tried to bring God into my everyday decisions. Prayers become so, it changes when you're going through, try again, really, really difficult situation. And I was trying to make a decision with my first husband, what to do. And I haven't shared this with a lot of people, but I feel like I'm supposed to, because somebody else is out there listening that needs to hear this. But he was ready to attempt suicide again. And I was so tired. And we had been doing this for 20 years. And I was so tired. And it got to the point where I knew that I was dying. I was dying inside. And even on the outside, nobody had a clue. Nobody had a clue, because, you know, I'm always this happy, jovial person. Nobody had a clue that I was dying inside. And then when he told me he just needed to die, he's like, just stop saving me. Stop saving me. Why are you doing that? For over a year, I heard that every single day. And when he told me that he was going to attempt suicide, he was going to commit suicide, and he just wanted to get it done right, I looked at him and I said, okay, then we're going to do it right. And I'm going to help you. And I looked up how the best way to commit suicide, how to shoot himself, where to shoot himself, how to set it up. I researched it all.
Wow.
And I sat there and we had it all figured out. I haven't even told my children this, so I don't know if they'll hear it or not, but he was just done. And he obviously wasn't successful, because he had died 3 times and we had priesthood blessings bring him back. And he was just so angry and didn't want to be there. And so we had our date picked. It was the day the kids were going to be gone. I had it all picked out, the spot. I knew what gun to use. I knew what bullets to use. And I said, you're going to call 911 just before you do it. And this is where you're going to do it. We had the whole thing planned. And I was like, he said, thank you. I just don't want to live anymore. And then about 10 days before D-Day, the Spirit told me so strongly, Stephanie, you got to go to the temple. And if anybody's lived with somebody that's mentally ill, he wouldn't let me go to the temple. He would not let me go, because if I was gone for 3 hours, he would commit suicide. And if I did go, he would. He tried, you know. And so this is what I was dealing with all the time. And he's like, you can't go, you can't go, you can't go. And I finally said, I have to go tonight. I have to go tonight. And he literally, he never got out of bed. He was so sick, he didn't get out of bed. He literally followed me out to the car, begging me to not go. And then he chased me down as much as he could, being as ill as he was, chased me down the road, pounding on the window. Don't go, don't go, don't go. And when I got to the temple, I was getting ready to go through the veil at the end. And I was so emotionally just praying, Heavenly Father, help me understand what I'm supposed to do. And tried to keep this man alive for 20 years, and now I'm going to help him be dead. And I really honestly didn't know what to do. And I didn't want my kids to know that. It was a lot weighing on my shoulders. And at this point in time, he was on disability. I'm working 3 jobs. I'm trying to keep what I can with my kids together. I still have 3 teenagers at home. And anyway, I literally heard over my right shoulder, Stephanie, you're done. You deserve happiness. And I looked over my shoulder. I said, I'm done. And of course, those of you that are in the temple know it's very quiet, very sacred. This little lady comes over. She's like, shh, be quiet. I'm like sobbing. And I'm like, did I just hear that? Did I really hear that? And I heard again over my shoulder, Stephanie, you're done. You deserve happiness. And I literally turned. I'm sitting at the very back in the corner. And I said, I deserve happiness. I deserve happiness. And she comes up to me. She's like, honey, let's just take you through the bell right now. Okay, she walks me all the way up past everybody up to the front. Couldn't even understand anything that was being said because I was blubbering so badly. But I'm sitting in the temple in this very peaceful, calm room, realizing what was happening. And it was then that I realized, Stephanie, you can't do this. You don't have any right to help him die. He's going to do it anyway on his own. You can't do that to your kids. You can't do that to him. You can't do that to yourself. You cannot do this. You're done. You just need to walk away. Of course, it took me a little while to walk away, but just because I set up a whole program for him with his mother and his friends. And I'm like, come and get him, take him, don't drive, because he can't drive. If he drives, he'll go off a cliff or he'll go into a mountain or all these things, you know, because these are all things I dealt with. And it was so, so hard because there was a lot of people that, and still do, tell me I should have stuck it out and I should have been there, but they don't know the rest of the story.
Yeah, it's quite a story. Tell me what your pain over the years has taught you.
Oh, Jeff, you should do this for a living. Oh yeah, you do. This is good stuff. You know, something I've learned from my pain, and I've been through a lot, as most people have, but there's always a light at the other end, and we just have to get through it. We just have to get through it. And we have to be very, very careful not to take upon our shoulders what's not ours to take. You know, I didn't have any right to help him die. He was going to do that on his own. But I felt very responsible because I had saved him all those times that he tried to die. And I didn't let him die. You know, and everybody would do that. Anybody would do that. Anybody would try to save them. But I really needed to go through that. And the interesting thing is, on my show, which is such an amazing show, and I'm so grateful to be able to do it, but we had a lady on there that had been through a lot of suicides too. In fact, she was the only living member of her family. Her mother and her father, her brothers, her 2 sisters, her aunt, her grandma, a couple cousins, and a nephew have all killed themselves. Wow. And she's the only living one of her family. Her and her husband and her children. Nobody else is alive. It's all been suicide. And we were talking on that show. She was on there as a guest, and within 20 minutes of that show getting over, she got an email, because we always give the contact information so somebody can contact. And it was a young girl that was in the process of committing suicide. And she, for some reason, turned her internet on and our show was on there. I know it's not for some reasons, because Heavenly Father was guiding it. And that's what happens every single week on our show, but was guiding. And she was able to talk to this girl down from suicide, who had just lost her father 2 weeks ago. It's from suicide. And she thought that was the only way out too. And she was able to talk her through that. And she said, you know, what do I do from here? And she goes, I got 2 young men that will be more than happy to come and talk to you about it. So she sent the missionaries over to this girl who was going to commit suicide. Within a few weeks, this girl got baptized.
Wow.
And within 6 months later, she's on a mission for the church, you know. And it's just like, I know that Heavenly Father's put me right where I am and given me the trials that I've had, so that I know I can relate to these people coming on, and I can relate to what's happening. And I've been a guest on many other podcasts that haven't turned out starting out this way, but have ended up talking about what it's like to be the title of my book I'm working on is Serial Suicide Survivor, a wife's story.
Wow. Yeah.
For that part of my life. And there's been other people that have called in and said, that's exactly what I needed to hear. You know, thank you. I know I can either stay with them. You've got to make that choice, either stay with them and help them to the end, or you've got to get out, because it's not your responsibility for their choices. And if it's affecting you and your children, you have got to figure out how to deal with that and not stay in it. And so I feel like all the things that I have been through and now I get to be on an international show talking about a lot of it, have all been there for me to learn from. And I had to go through the heartache and the hurt and the pain to be able to see the joy on the other side. I would not have appreciated Ken, and I would not have appreciated John the way I do and love them with all my heart had I not gone through what I went through.
So let me ask you about that too. Was the joy you've experienced since you married Ken, even with that loss, and then also now being married to John, was the happiness you've had since you were like 54 worth all of the struggle and the pain and the difficulties?
You know, I've been asked that a lot, and I absolutely would go back and do it again. Absolutely, because I am the person I am today because I went through that.
Yeah.
I don't know who I would be, you know, and I would hope it would be somebody fantastic, but that wasn't what I was sent here to do. I was sent here to go through those trials and those tribulations so I can be where I am right now, helping other people. You know, John's helped me so much with the stuff that happened with his wife, and I've been able to help him with the stuff that's happened with Ken. And, you know, we wouldn't have been on the same page had we not gone through what we went through.
So you see your 2 divorces and your widowhood as part of your life path.
Absolutely, they are part of my life path. Absolutely.
And you see what you've learned as a way to minister to others from the pain you've experienced with empathy, and to impart the wisdom you gained through what you learned.
Exactly.
I tell my
Thank you.
coaching clients sometimes that the depth of pain that they have felt indicates the depth of love that they are capable of. And I think that's what you're saying too.
Right. It you know, it's just, John and I were just talking today about just simply holding hands. You know, that act of holding hands, how he's sitting here holding my hand right now, how beautiful that is, because, you know, when you're dating, all those things that are supposed to be done right are done right. Right. But my first husband, he held my hand when we were dating. He never held it again for 30 years until we separated, and he asked me to come back. And I said, you're not coming back until you can figure out how to hold my hand. I mean, it was just those simple acts. You hold my hand. you know, and it was so awkward for him. I'm like, we've been married for 30 years. It's so awkward. You don't even know how to hold my hand. But then his girlfriend that came along after we got divorced, he held her hand all the time. And I
Maybe
told
he
her
had
one
learned
time, I said, you know what? You are so fortunate. And he married a dancer. I taught dance for years and years and years. He'd never danced with me. But we went to this thing together. Yes, it's crazy because, you know, here he is with his girlfriend and here I am with my friends, not guy friends, just girlfriends. And he's up there dancing with her, you know, and holding her hand. And I just went up to her. I went to him and I said, you know what? Good for you. Good for you to learn that. And I told her, you are very lucky that he's dancing with you and holding your hand. Appreciate it. You know?
That's amazing. I mean, that you could do that. And then also, it just reminds me of something Jeff and I say to each other a lot, which is we're a lot better companions now for each other than we were in our previous marriages. And it wasn't because we didn't want to be better
We
in
didn't
those
try
marriages.
hard. We did.
We did.
Right.
We tried hard, but like we hadn't learned what we've learned and
Right.
we learned it. And so I think when we are intentional about our personal development and about healing and doing our work on ourselves, then, you know, we do end up being better partners. And I think we actually have a better chance at that joy that Jeff's talking about from the pain of the past, you know, transforming it.
Yeah.
I thought before
Absolutely.
my first divorce that, you know, getting married and having a career and having children and having a house was all just normal. That's what people do. And the problem with that thinking is if it's just normal, it's not special. And having lost everything I have is much more special now because I don't take it for granted. And I think that's really, I mean, it's a painful lesson to learn that way, but I learned it.
Jeff, I'm so glad you said that because every day of my life now, I'm just so grateful for the small miracles that happen every day. I mean, I look back at all the stuff that happened with Ken and there was miracle after miracle after miracle. And there was with my first two marriages too. They were just not great miracles, but I got out of them alive and I got out of them better. And I got out of them with a stronger, and you guys both know this because you've been there, but when you are stripped down to nothing but your soul and you have nothing left to give and all you have to do is ask Heavenly Father and he will be there for you. As hard as it is, you have to pull those bootstraps up and go, okay, where do you want me and what do I do and how am I going to get there?
Right.
Because sometimes you're just going, if this mountain is too big to climb, and you hear, take a next step on that rock, step on that rock.
It reminds me of something that Hall of Fame quarterback Kurt Warner said in a totally different context, but he was talking about how he was dreaming of playing in the NFL, which he eventually did, but he was sacking groceries. He was on food stamps. He was in a tough place. He was trying to be father to a special needs child and, you know, had taken that on with his wife. And he said, you know, I just said to God, I'm in a place I don't want to be. So use me here however you want. And he said he decided that he was going to line up his aisle when he stocked shelves in the store. It was going to be the best faced aisle in the entire store. He said, I don't know if anybody noticed. He said, but I did. And he said that laid the foundation for me to make a commitment to excellence, no matter what I was doing, even if it was just stocking shelves in a grocery store. And of course, ultimately he achieved things way beyond what he dreamed about. But I think sometimes when we're in the middle of a tough situation, like Joseph, who was sold into Egypt, being sold into Egypt or going to prison.
Yeah.
And yet it says God prospered him in each of those circumstances. He prospered him as a slave to be the head person in his master's house, and then head prisoner in the prison, and then ultimately head person in the whole country. And, you know, that seems miraculous and amazing, but there are real people who, because God's with them, they prosper in every adversity that they're called upon to bear.
Right. Jeff, I want to expand on that too, because I totally agree. But people need to learn to see that, to look for that. And that's what we talk about on my show is hope, healing, and miracles. And it's the miracles and having hope in everything, whether it's spiritual, emotional, physical, financial, whatever it is. There is always little miracles. Just the fact that I was able to go to the temple that night, I wasn't going to get stopped because I'd been stopped every time for 3 years, and having that spirit. And I'm not saying you guys are going to hear the voice of anybody in the temple, but for me, I almost needed to be thumped over the head, going, Stephanie, you are done. You deserve happiness, because I was doing everything I thought I was supposed to be doing, trying to keep my family together that was disintegrating, trying to keep my husband alive, who didn't want to be alive, trying to do all these things. And it wasn't until finally I put myself in a place to listen.
Yeah.
And most of the time, obviously, for a long time, I didn't listen. I just didn't listen. And even after Ken passed away, when he said, Stephanie, I need you to listen. And it took a friend of ours to come and go, you're not listening. Ken's trying to talk to you and you're not listening.
I love that part of our episode about listening, because we all get distracted and we all sometimes don't want to hear what's being said through the spirit, because it may not be what we had on our agenda.
Right.
But yeah, sometimes when we're stuck in those toxic patterns, we do need like a big revelation to and like you said, even it even took you time as a human being to figure out how to make that happen, but you still had it and you could hold on to it and you could be led by that obvious answer.
Well, and I shudder to think if I hadn't listened, and it was kind of interesting because my husband's best friend, Ken's best friend, has been his best friend for 30 plus years. And he was one of the ones that we called the hospital the night before he died. And he was just in tears and they were talking, and then he could keep him laughing all the time. And so Ken's laughing while he's dying, because this friend, Steve was joking. That's what they always did, And then I called Steve the next day and told him after Ken had died, I said, he died. And then the next day after I got home and got my head back wrapped around what was really going on. And I called him and I said, because he plays guitar and sings and he's incredible. And I said, would you sing at Ken's funeral? And he's like, yes, I will sing. And they're down in Lehigh. And within a day, everybody that I had planned on the rest of the funeral all fell apart. Nobody was coming. I'm like, who do I have for pallbearers? Who do I have for speakers? Nobody that I was planning except for Steve's song was coming to the funeral. And I was mad. I was going through this point in my life where I'm like, you jerks, do you think COVID's only in Montpelier, Idaho? It's not. It's everywhere you guys are too. I was just so mad that people were not coming and not supporting me because of this, and I understand it. I was just going through this emotional poor me thing, but I called Steve back and I said, so would you sing and would you give one of the prayers and would you be a pallbearer? And he's like, of course, Stephanie, of course I will. I'll do whatever you need me to do, and I was so grateful. And those were just the people that surrounded me in this horrific time of my life, and within 2 weeks, he and Steve and his wife came back and spent another weekend with me just to make sure I was okay and to check if anything needed to be done. Then 2 weeks after that, they came back again. Then another 2 weeks after that, they came back again. And they did this from August to the 1st of December till he got COVID and died. And it's like, Steve's gone too. I mean, it was just, he died of COVID too. And it was just not from anything we did. He got it down there too, but it was just one of those things going, how is that even possible? How's that even possible that Ken and his best friend both died of COVID within 5 months of each other?
Wow.
There's a couple things I wanted to say about this story, this part of your story. One is that whether it's death or divorce, I think it's really important for us to have people show up. And it might not be who we think it will. And some of the people we might think don't. And I mean, I think in general, when it's not COVID times, most of the time, widows will get more support, like because people show up with flowers and there's a funeral and there's this like closure. And then with a divorce, with the death of a marriage, like we don't have such ceremonies.
No.
And so that's one thing I think is a difference. But it doesn't make it any less of a loss, and a loss requires support.
Oh, so that, Cathy, that was said so well, because I know with my first divorce, it was just crazy because the people that turned against me, shocking.
Yeah.
Shocking. And I'm like, how in the world have you were at the hospital with us every single time he attempted suicide, and now you've turned on me because I walked away and I couldn't handle it anymore? You know, I'm like, and he had to step up. You know, he stepped up. He didn't die.
In a lot of ways, that part
suicide.
was good for him. Like you wouldn't have guessed it.
It was. And, you know, it's like, whoa. And it wasn't just one, it was a lot of them. Yeah. And it's like, you guys have no idea what went on behind the doors in my home. So
Speaking
how dare you judge me?
I remember specifically getting revelation after my first marriage ended, when almost everyone in his family disowned me, except for one very special person, which meant the world to me. They do not know what they're doing. Like kind of like what Christ said, they don't know what they know not what.
Forgive them, for they know not what they do. Exactly. Right.
And I was just thinking, okay, they're misinformed and I can let it go. And that helped a lot to like just be given that answer.
It's hard to get to that point though, isn't it? Because it's like,
it still
that
hurts.
was your family. It still does to me too. It's because I don't have any relationship with his family at all. You know, in fact, when he died, I was told I couldn't come because there was a death sentence on my head if I showed up.
Oh man.
I'm like,
terrible.
I didn't do anything.
Well, I've seen it done better. I've seen it done where, you know, that spouse that's still there is invited to things and they're still part of the family. And but
like, what happened to us?
Kind of depends on what people choose to do. But we definitely encourage people to be empathetic and caring and try to be as helpful as possible and supportive to both people in those situations.
Because we don't know. I mean, I'm still very good friends with my second husband, and all of our friends up there are still good friends of mine. Mm-hmm. And I'm so grateful for that. And people are like, how could you still stay friends? And I'm like, because the circumstances were what they were, and I learned so much. I learned so much.
And the other thing I wanted to mention is that so Jeff and I both have lost a sibling to death, and so we haven't experienced widowhood, but we do know what it's like to lose a close loved one. And for me, it wasn't strong like yours, where you had very specific circumstances that allowed you to know that it was his time. He told you it was. He knew it was.
Yeah, I knew it was. I had the confirmation. Thank goodness that it was. Horrible.
For me, it was more of a subtle, like, it was her time. I didn't know it was going to happen, and I didn't know it was going to happen that fast, but it was her time, and it helped me accept it. And we recently did a podcast on radical acceptance and how, there's certain things in our lives we've been able to accept easier than others. And those things that we could accept, we healed from faster. And those things that we couldn't accept, didn't want to accept, like wanted to fight against, it's everything we fought against is what kept us really stuck in grief, like way too long.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because when John was brought into my life, his situation with his wife was so different than my situation with my husband. I mean, he didn't know where she was for months, until they found her body. But there was there's been a lot of healing that needed to happen with him and his family, and he's so amazing that he is so calm. And I'm over here going, woo, I get frustrated, but it's just, I think Heavenly Father, if we'll just listen, he wants the best for us. He knows what's best for us. We do the best we can, but we can't do this alone. We can't do this alone. He doesn't want us to. It's like, if you'll just listen, I'll tell you, and I'll bring you somebody incredibly amazing.
That's like the theme of your life now, isn't it?
It totally is. I'm trying to listen. And I'm I'm trying. And sometimes he brings other people into your life and saying, okay, honey, you're not listening. So let's just bring you back and help you out.
Well, I think this has been so insightful for our listeners and for us, just to be able to understand your journey and what worked and what didn't. And, you're the highs, the lows, the pains, the gains, the love, the loss, and, and all the contrasting parts of widowhood versus divorce. And also the similarities that, it's all a loss, and every relationship is meant to teach us something.
Right.
And that every loss deserves empathy and compassion and support. And hopefully our listeners, as we can commit to show up better for others who are going through hard times.
And
And if I
also-
can leave, go ahead.
I was
Go
going
ahead,
to say, I also want to point out to our listeners again that Stephanie didn't find the love she was looking for until she was 54 years old. And so for any of you who have been through lots of losses and pain over lost relationships, whether it's to death or divorce or whatever, just keep in mind that it's not too late. And
Never too late.
You can find wonderful experiences on the other side of suffering.
In love in later years, huh?
Right.
So
Exactly.
parting words real quick from you.
Yeah, it's just interesting because we don't, like I said before, we don't know our path. We know we want to get back and live with Christ and Heavenly Father. That's our goal. And we would love to do that. John's like, you know what, Steph, I just want to spend the rest of my life with you. And I'm so grateful for that, because that's what I want too, and we needed to be awake and listening and aware, and he knows. So just if you put your faith in him, then don't question it. Put your faith in Heavenly Father, let him give you the answer, and then don't go, okay, but let's go through this checklist here. No, because if I would have done that, I wouldn't have this incredible husband that I'm married to right now. And I know he was handpicked by Ken and delivered to me by Heavenly Father. And that was just, I know that with every ounce of my being. And so I'm just encouraging everybody out there, just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. But this is what I want to end with. You need to be the person that you want to be married to. Who are you? And if you can love yourself and live with yourself, then you'll find somebody that's just like you, that you can love and live with.
That's great.
That's a great note to end on. Remember, any time is a great time for more love in your life. Thank you for watching and listening.